Hi. It's been a little bit. It's been like oh. It's been 3 years. My bad. I took a step away from this hobby for quite a while. I took a step back from the actual flipping side. I had a weird relationship and kind of burnt out on flipping itself. The community itself was also pretty toxic at the time, being perfectly honest, and generally I wasn't enjoying the hobby in the same way that I wanted to, so I took a step back. I didn't expect my step back to be 3 years, but I'm back. I really want to continue making content for this hobby and for this community, so I'm here again. I wanted to rethink the way that I do it and make better quality content, so we're here. Bear with me. I've been back in this community for about 1.5 years now. I've been interacting with people in the community and posting like story clips, for example, where I've just been doing stuff. But I haven't made actual quality content on like a YouTube channel or just a generally high effort content piece in about 3 years. Actually 3.5. It was April 2021. A lot has changed. The gist is, I want to make quality content again. I want to make content better than I ever did before. I want to make reviews. I want to make documentaries, interviews, flipper analysis and breakdowns. I would love to make educational content, documentary stuff about the history of certain knives or companies, stuff like that. I want to make the content that this community has been asking for a little while, and content that I wanted to make 3 years ago that I wasn't equipped to make. Ironically, after this long break of not making content, my flipping has actually gone on a lot better than it ever was before, and so I feel even more qualified to be making this type of content now than I did back then, which is kind of funny considering I haven't been here for 3 years. But this video is specifically going to be breaking down this new review system that I have made. I wanted to create a new metric system, a more objective way to review a knife. Full disclaimer, this idea was extremely inspired by 2 yoyo review channels, Gingie and Scayanite. They both use pretty interesting ways to review a yoyo a little more objectively. And Gingie also has this thing on the yoyo expert forums that essentially details a tier list of all the yoyos that he's thrown that he may not have made a review for video-wise. Gives the tier list details, explains why they're so good, so on. And it's a very objective way. He looks at power, he looks at stability, he looks at binds. And I want to do the same with knives. My general issue with flipping reviews has always been they're either too subjective or you don't really get the information you want out of them. You get, oh, it flipped good, it good, please buy it. Or, it flipped bad, don't buy, bad knife. Or, the third kind is a lot of talking about the knife and how it feels, but never really getting into the actual nitty-gritty of would you want to buy it and whether it's for you. So basically, I created this little metric system here that details what exactly makes a knife good or why I'm grading a knife a certain way. The idea is to have a more objective tier list with detailed points of why and why not to buy it and whether those fit your preferences, and get a more objective look at reviewing knives as a whole. Bear with me, this system may take a little while to refine, but I'm going to try it and see how it works. The general idea is I want to make a much better resource both for finding my reviews, understanding my reviews, and being more clear-cut and objective with my reviews. So this video was kind of a where have I been introduction, and then also explaining the metric system and an explanation as to how I'm planning to review knives from now on. I have a bunch of knives that are going to be given to me or lent to me by friends to review. I've got quite a few interesting ones, and I also plan to review some old knives that I either never reviewed or just particularly really like that I want to cover. So my reviews will be split into a table or a tier list that is divided, and I'll show it to you on screen, with S plus being a 90 out of 100 or more, 80 out of 100 meaning an S, an A being 70 plus, B being 60, C being 50, and F being anything below 50. Generally speaking, an S plus knife is nearly perfect or basically one of the best knives you can get. S tier is a really, really good knife that may have a couple of issues or subjective things, but is generally seen as a super good knife. A is just a generally good knife, nothing really bad with it, zero regrets buying it. B tier is reserved for knives that are good but niche, or maybe a little weird but are still fun, just not objectively that great. C is knives that are technically flippable and they're fine, but I wouldn't really recommend purchasing them or owning them. And anything that is F, don't buy it. It's probably not worth buying or is a collection purpose knife only. So the 10 metrics that I'm going to be using in this review system are going to be listed on screen as I explain them. Generally speaking, there are 10 points per section and there are 10 sections, equaling to 100 points. The first metric is technicality. How well does the knife do complicated manipulation tricks? This generally goes in a couple of categories like fixed twirls, or stuff like oximity's style of going against the knife, where you're essentially consistently doing weird movements, basically. The next one is agility. How well does it shift momentum and change directions? Generally, lower scoring knives on agility tend to be a little more stiff or a little more sluggish. They may take a little more effort to move directions or tend to try and stay moving in one direction, while a really agile knife will consistently move around with whatever direction you throw at it. This doesn't necessarily mean it's a fast or a slow knife, it's just how well it can shift momentum. Speaking of which, momentum. Momentum is essentially how powerful the knife feels. This is something that a lot of people don't really pay attention to, but in my opinion is pretty important. If you look at momentum, a knife that carries a lot of momentum will have quite a lot of power. If it has a lot of power, you can continue that momentum well, which leads into flow, which is how well does the knife continue momentum, or how effortlessly does it flip? Does it take a lot of effort to move, or does it carry its own momentum cleanly and flow pretty well without any interruptions? A knife with no flow or a lack of momentum would probably struggle quite a bit. As some knives, you tend to need to add extra power, do kind of technique shifts, or just adjust to giving the knife the space it needs or extra power it needs to be able to complete a trick. Next is comfort. Comfort is a tiny bit more subjective, but all of these are going to have a clear listing of why I'm saying these things. Comfort tends to fall under a couple of things. One is the general feel when flipping. Is it grippy? Is it slippery? Is the finish really rough on my hands? Do I like the finish on the spine when I'm doing chaplains? Do I think that there are a lot of sharp edges? Is the jimping too short or is it too sharp? Generally, just flipping comfort. How comfortable is it in your hands when you're holding it and when you're flipping it? On the more objective side of that, there are ergonomics. Ergonomics talk about the general thickness of the handles, the length of the handles and the blade, how it feels in your hand measurement-wise. This doesn't seem that important to a lot of people, but nowadays there are a lot of long-handled knives and there are some handles that are pretty thick. Considering we have quite the range from a Demon Orange Mood all the way out to a Barfly OG2, I think it's pretty important to cover how it feels in the hand, because people with different sized hands will also need to know exactly how it would fit in their hands. Next up is value. This is a very important criteria for a lot of people because Balis are really freaking expensive. You need to get what you pay for, and when it comes to a budget knife, you want to see whether the materials are worth it or whether it has good tolerances for the price. When you go from mid to high end, you want to make sure you're still getting the materials you're paying for or the quality and finish that you're paying the extra money for. This is an extremely important one, and honestly, is a pretty objective thing considering things like materials and quality aren't subjective. Durability also plays a part into this, and that's the next metric. How fragile or durable is it? Does it lose tolerances easily? Are the materials really fragile, or do they bend or chip easily? Does it have binding issues, or is it good at being a beater? General stuff like hardware stripping or pins falling out are also under durability and extremely important to know because a lot of people beat their knives, or at least you should know whether you want to safe clean it or if you're scared to drop your knife. So it's a pretty important thing to know when reviewing one. And finally, the most subjective out of all of them, aesthetic. When I'm reviewing a knife specific version, let's say this Zephyr v4.5, I'm going to cover the colorways and versions of this exact version. So let's say the v4.5 only came in pink, but the v3 came in green. I'm not going to rate how the green looks, I'm only going to rate how the pink on the v4.5 looks. Other things like general design language, how it looks, and how it sounds are extremely important. And while this is the most subjective, I'm going to give it clear notes as to why I scored it that way, because if your preferences line up with it, it'll probably score higher. Sound is extremely important. It isn't as important to flippers, but in the general scheme of the community, there are some knives that people specifically buy because they sound really good, so it's important to cover it anyway when you're talking about the general experience of a knife. So once all of these metrics are scored out of 10, they'll be added up out of 100, and that'll give the grade on the table that was given earlier. I'll also add some extra notes, such as what flipping style it might be good for, such as fanning and transfers, or tech, or power aerials, as well as what purpose it might serve, such as pure flipping, EDC, collecting, traveling, things like that. I'll also try and include some notes on the general community perception of this knife, if I can, just because getting a little more context as to the wider community's opinion on it is great, and since this is, at the end of the day, still a subjective review, even if I try and make it as objective as possible, it's a good idea. And I will also try and compare it to a couple of other knives in a similar price bracket, just to see whether it compares, because comparing and contrasting is another great way of reviewing things, and I don't think people do it often enough. Alright, so in conclusion, I am going to be reviewing some knives using this new metric system. I'm going to try and open up the Discord server and start writing up that master tier list overall. And the other thing that I really want to clear up and make super, understandable is that this is a new system. I'm going to try and refine it over time, but bear with me. I'm going to try and make content more often, and I am actually back in this community and in this hobby. I'm going to be trying making more content. I'm going to be posting more flipping stuff on Instagram. I'm going to be trying and, just do more community interaction stuff again. I'm back. For real this time. I'm going to try and make content of all kinds. I'm going to be working on my editing and my production value as I go. So I'm going to try and upgrade the way that I do things and improve my quality of content as I go. But yeah, it'll be a process, so bear with me. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you look forward to some of the content that I'll be doing in the future. I am hoping to do my first flipping theory related video in the next few days when my internet actually works properly. But until then, let me know what you think in the comments if you think I need to adjust any of the metrics or add anything on. And until then, keep flipping, cuties. I love you all.